I'm going to read the story, and then we'll fly through what we talked about yesterday, and we'll pick up then where we left off. I'm pretty sure I know where that is. I've been shot anyway. So here's a story of the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now, that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said that the man, remember the Jews means the Jewish leadership, to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this is why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." This is why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. We talked about the things that we've done already, or talked about in John's Gospel. Talked about that after this is some sort of amount of time that has elapsed between different stories in John, and so then Matthew, Mark, and Luke can help us piece together what is happening because they tell some of those stories. And then Christ reveals his deity by healing at the feast. So the place of the incident was near the sheep gate, and the sheep gate, we're not entirely sure where it was, but we knew it was near the temple because it was called the sheep gate, because that was the gate through which the sheep would be herded to go to the sacrifices when they were sacrificing. So it would have been somewhere in that vicinity, and actually we do know where it was, and it was called Bethesda. The pool was called Bethesda, and Bethesda means, if you want to remember this, Bethesda means house of mercy. I think this is about where we left off. Am I right about that? Have we talked about house of mercy? No. Okay, so you need to write that down. You want to write that down. By the way, there's a naval hospital, probably the best military hospital anywhere, and it's called Bethesda. And so it's the house of mercy. And then this is the remains of the pool. You can go to Jerusalem today and you will see these remains. In 1888, as one of the chapels nearby was being repaired, they discovered underneath a layer of other things that had built on top of it, they discovered the remains of the pool of Bethesda in the old city of Jerusalem. And they knew it was Bethesda because on the wall there was a very ancient, faded carving of an angel stirring up the water. And so that's how they knew, and it's in the place where it should be, right near the Temple Mount. So these are the remains of the pool. I'm going to explain to you what you're looking at in a little bit, but here's what was excavated in 1888, and this is the actual pool that you could get to by going down a flight of stairs to get into the pool, and it was filled by a spring, by a nearby spring. This is the spring, and the spring would gush at intermittent times and not regularly. It would occasionally gush, and that was what was causing the water to be stirred. Now, this sort of old wives' tale of an angel coming down and troubling the water was their answer to why this happens. Why does this happen? And the belief arose that if you could get into the water while it was still being stirred up, that you would be healed. And it's probably spiritual ignorance on their part and scientific ignorance as well. But nevertheless, it became a gathering place for people who needed to be healed. And so they would be lying around the pool waiting for the waters to stir. Yes. You can get a pencil. Oh, there you go. You get a pencil from Malachi right here. Thank you, Malachi. So here's the thing. Because of this, and remember that John says in Jerusalem there is a pool called Bethesda. So even when John was writing this, the pool was still there, and so he knew exactly where it was. But over time, as is true in a lot of places of Israel, buildings and churches were built over those holy sites to commemorate it, and that's what happened at Bethesda. And so, and then those churches, as invaders would come in, would be destroyed, and then they'd build another one, either nearby or on the same site, and that happened over and over again. So here is not just the pool of Bethesda; it's also the remains of those churches that were built over that site to commemorate this exact event. Those churches were built. So let's talk a little bit about the meaning of the incident. What's going on here? As in everything else we've talked about, we're looking for how do we see Christ's deity in this. These were written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how this shows us Christ's deity. So the first thing is that this incident, this healing, incident isn't the best word, this healing reveals the grace and mercy of God. Jesus walks up to this guy and says, do you want to be healed? And instead of saying what I think you and I would say if for 38 years we were a paraplegic, yes, I do. Please heal me if you can. Or you'd go, yeah, right, you can't do that. But you wouldn't say, I can't get down into the pool, which is what he says. And Jesus doesn't rebuke him either for his ignorance about the pool. He doesn't rebuke him for not saying, yes, please, sir, help me. And he was powerless to help himself. But Jesus treats him with respect nonetheless. Listen, it isn't an angel. He needed Jesus. All he needed was Jesus to become him. And so John records this incident so that we might see the deity of Christ. So tell me, how do we see the deity of Christ in this? Yeah. That's something only God can do, right? Heal a man that's been an invalid for 38 years. That has a miracle written all over it. So that's something only God can do. Now, there's no mention of the man's faith. Jesus doesn't ask him if he believes. But Jesus even gave him the will and the strength to stand. I don't want to be too hard on this guy because he did take up his bed and walk. He didn't just sit there and go, no, that can't happen. He could have said, I'm an invalid. I have been for 38 years. What do you mean take up my bed and walk, right? Let's put it this way. Let's say that it's the modern day, and you walked up to a complete stranger in the mall in a wheelchair and said, "Hey, get up and walk." Yeah, right, exactly. That's the situation we have here. He didn't know who Jesus was. He'd never seen Jesus before in his life. And this complete stranger says, "Take up your mat and walk." And he did. I think that speaks well, right? I think that speaks well of him. So I'm gonna return to this idea that I don't think I think that the curriculum is too harsh on him at the end. So so this miracle occurred on the Sabbath. That's the other problem. So how do we see Christ's deity in the fact that he healed on the Sabbath? Yeah. Yeah, not kind of like, exactly, yeah. Yeah, he is the Lord of the Sabbath. He created the Sabbath. And so he can do whatever he wants, right? Now, the Sabbath had become something other than what it was originally intended to be. But yes, he shows his deity in the fact that he has authority over the Sabbath. He has authority over everything, yes. Well, he kept the law, and he kept it perfectly. But I wouldn't say he's above the law, I would say he's the creator of the law. He has authority over the law. And he kept the law, right? What he wasn't keeping was the traditions of men, because that's what this became. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So the purpose of the Sabbath was to make sure that nobody was overworked. Picture this. Picture an ancient or maybe even a modern day situation where you have a boss or you're a slave and you have someone who owns you and they work you to a point that is inhuman or inhumane. Can you picture that? And God says that's not going to happen. These are all my people, and so you will work for 6 days. And on the seventh day you'll rest, and it will be holy and consecrated to the Lord. So the purpose was to have a day where you concentrated on your relationship with God, and B, so that no master, no overlord could force someone to work for 7 days. Now, if there is one day of rest, what does that presume? 6 days of work, right? 6 days of work. So it assumes work as well, but it also assumes kind treatment of other people, and that makes sense because it's God. But what Jesus really violated, as I just told you, was not the law. What Jesus violated was the tradition of men, because the Sabbath had become something completely other. They had come up with hundreds of rules that are not in the Bible. What God meant when he said, you will rest on one day, you will rest from your normal labor. So in my case, I would rest from teaching, but cleaning house, or, meeting with friends or whatever else. It was meant to be a day that you concentrated on God, on faith. And so it assumes 6 days of work. But what it became was these picky, inane rules that didn't make sense. For example, you couldn't wear a nailed shoe on the Sabbath. You could wear a sewn shoe, but not a nailed shoe. You could only walk a certain distance, and I think it was about a mile. But more than that, it was work. You couldn't carry anything. If you were a tailor, you couldn't wear a needle in your shirt or your cloak. But if you weren't one, that's fine. Go ahead and put the needle in. It doesn't make any sense. And so Jesus Jesus is showing not only that he has authority over the Sabbath, but he's also showing that this is not God's law. These man-made laws are not God's law. What was the problem with the law in general? Yeah, you couldn't keep it. You couldn't keep it. Nobody can. And that was the whole purpose of the law as well, right? To show us our need for a Savior. We can't do it. Every religion on the face of the earth, and you'll hear this from me many times in the next 3 years, every religion on the face of the earth has the same idea. Do this, and this, and this. And don't do this, and this, and this. And you can reach God. You can work your way to God. You can make yourself good enough to be acceptable to God. Whatever that God is. That is what Islam is. That is what Buddhism is. That is what Hinduism is. They are all, now the do's and don'ts can change a little bit, but it's all on do's and don'ts. It's all do. It's all on you to get your way to God. Wouldn't that be a heavy load? What if I do something wrong? What if I make the sacrifice and I forget something? What if I don't give them enough money? It would be such a to never know. Every other religion in the world is this: do. You do. Here's the difference. The word is everything that needs to be done has been done for Jesus Christ. And be grateful for it. So this story shows us not only the grace and mercy of God, but also the truth that he has, in his mercy, in his grace, he has done everything we need to be with him forever. And we don't ever have to worry about it. We also see in this story the condition of the man. Now, I'm gonna compare the condition of the man to all of us, because this can speak to all of us, because this illustrates who anyone without Christ is, not just this man. Now, this first word is a little unfortunate, so I'm going to tell you what it means. Impotent, it means powerless or weak, and so we're going to go with powerless, because I don't want to say impotent 10 times. So we're powerless. We are powerless to save ourselves. We are powerless to live a perfect life. None of us is perfect. And the man admitted he was powerless. Well, how can I? I don't have help. I need help. Guess what? That's profound. Yes, you do. You need help. Not from an angel, not from someone getting you into the pool, but from Jesus. And we all need that. We are all powerless and weak apart from Christ. We cannot save ourselves. And so the second thing is that now the man wasn't blind. Spiritually, he was blind. He was blind to the truth. And so are we without Christ. We are blind to the truth. This next word is so old that I had never heard it before. So again, we're going to give different words. Halt. I mean, to me, that's like, but apparently it means crippled or lame. It means physically disadvantaged in some way. And it's a term that was used for someone who couldn't walk. And then the last one is withered. Apparently that word meant to be unable to use your hands. So this man was, in our terms, was a quadriplegic, unable to use his hands or his feet. This is what Romans 8:3 says. For God has done what the law weakened by the flesh could not do. God has done for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Like Jesus did for this man, something he could not do for himself. The law could not save. If we could keep it perfectly, it would save. But we can't. And so the law could not save based on our sinfulness. So like the blind and the and the lame and the others at the pool, our condition is grave. And without Christ, we're lost. Look, this is you. This is me apart from Christ. This is everyone apart from Christ. It's an explanation of everyone apart from Christ. And then also, he was waiting. He was at the pool and he was waiting. He was waiting for someone to help him. And similarly, Israel was waiting. It was waiting for thousands of years for a Messiah. And so we have these helpless people at the pool of Bethesda waiting to be healed. And they have no hope apart from that. And so Israel's been waiting for thousands of years for a Messiah, and he comes, and they don't figure it out. They don't recognize it. Messiah is standing right in front of them, and they don't see it. They don't recognize it. And so they miss all of it because of that. The Savior of the world has come, and they didn't realize it. And so Christ, through his word and the preaching of the gospel, comes as a light shining in the darkness. That's what Isaiah says about him. But the world still fails to recognize him. And then this man was needing help, as do we. We can't get to heaven from here on our own. And so we need Christ, and so does he. And if we don't tell him, who's going to? This man didn't need to get in the water. He just needed Jesus. And the same is true for us. We don't need to keep the law. We don't need to do any sort of ritual or rite to come to Christ. We just come right as we are. And he will. Now, this last part, I'm going to give a little bit different view of it. It says here that the first breath of persecution came from the man who was healed. They're going to be very harsh on this man and say that he got angry at Jesus for saying, don't sin anymore, and so that nothing else bad will happen to you. And so he went and narked he ratted out Jesus. I don't read it that way. And maybe when Jesus said, and by the way, I think I told you this yesterday, there must have been some connection between his condition and his sin, but we don't know what it is. But there was some connection, or else Jesus wouldn't have said that. But what they're saying is instead of being grateful to Jesus, he runs to the religious leaders. Because he's angry at Jesus. We don't know. That might be right. But I think he also didn't know who he was. And when Jesus came back, he's like, oh, yeah, you're the guy. You're Jesus. And then he might have just been like, they want to know who he is. He didn't know why. They wanted to know who he was. So he told them. And then the Jewish leaders begin, obviously, to berate Jesus because he violated the Sabbath. By healing a man. And so the persecution of Christ, the enmity toward Christ does happen here. But it increases here. But I don't think that can be blamed on that. Okay, I'm going to give you the quiz. I'm going to ask you to turn it in on Monday. And I am going to move your test to Wednesday. I just feel like you need an extra day. It's a big test. So your unit test will be Wednesday. Everybody got that? Yeah. Here's what I saw. Great.